Hey, Kevin here, Mr. DIY Dork from DIYDork.com. Today I'm going to show you how to make a really interesting little table using casters, all thread, and some really interesting scraps that you can find at a hardware store if you look in the right section. I'll show you where to find them. So anyway, check this out. It's really cool. I think you're going to like it. So I'm on my way to Menards, the hardware store I like in town, and I'm crossing this bridge here. And the cool thing about this bridge here in Jefferson City, Missouri, is that my dad built it back in the day when he used to work at a bridge company. So anyway, I'll take you to Menards and I'll show you where to find these scraps. All right, so I just pulled up to Menards. Here it is in all its glory. And I like this store a lot. It's like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, except it's a lot lower priced. They always have really awesome rebates. It's kind of an underdog. I doubt there's near as many as the Home Depots or Lowe's. It's more of like a Midwestern thing, but this place is rad. I'll take you inside, show you some of the cool stuff they have, and where to find scraps, really low priced. All right, so if you've seen my workroom tour video, you saw how I built these little tables using cutouts from countertops, like when they would cut the sinks out. Well, I was here at Menards, and for $2.50, they have these like shelf scraps, and they, got black, fake wood, white. I even see a green one down there. So I think I'm gonna grab a black one and a white one. We can make two little tables out of this, but I'll show you another spot to find cool wood. All right, now another spot to check out is the clearance section or the bargain bins. Right here, this end cap has a whole bunch of just odd length boards, 2x4s, by 6s, by 8s, by 10s, a little bit of green pressure treated wood, which I would not use for any interior stuff. But like right here, these boards up here are only like 69 and 89 cents, and they are at least 4 foot long, so you could use them for projects, anything you could think of. So make sure to check out little clearance sections like this too. All right, so I just brought the shelves home, and they didn't fly out of the back of the truck or anything. And when I paid for them, I think you saw the sign earlier, I paid $2.49 a piece. Well, Menards is always awesome, and that was cheap anyway. But then there was a surprise rebate for $2 a piece. So these things ended up only costing 49 cents each. So that's an awesome deal. I did notice that they did have a little bit of chipping and cracking on the edges, but we're actually going to deal with it anyway. So how about I go ahead and I make this and show you how to do it. All right, so first things first, I need to chop the boards in half. So if you can see here, I already have some measuring and laid out some marks to go ahead and cut them down. So the boards were 48 inches, bought them that way, so I'm gonna chop them in half at 24 inches. So I drew the line at 24. The reason I have so much tape is that when I chop it down with my skill saw here, I want this, the black square metal piece down there to ride along the tape instead of riding along the black finish and scratching it all up. Also, it'll help the very edge where I cut to not chip away too much. It might still get a little jagged, but it won't be too bad. Okay, also, I did the edges here. And let me zoom in here. When I bought them, the corners were kind of messed up. Okay, I'm sure they got banged around, and that's why they're selling them for 50 cents. They're just trying to get rid of all the old broken shelves. So what I did was the same type thing. I put on some tape, and I actually took this coin. I have no idea where it's from, some other country, and just lined it up to the corners, traced it with a pencil, got a nice little round edge, keeps your leg from bumping in and getting scratched or whatever, and that should work really well. The other reason I have all this tape is the same thing with my jigsaw here. It's got the little metal bottom. I don't want it to scratch up, so it's going to ride along the tape. Then, when it's all cut down, we can start figuring out where to mount the all thread, and we'll use tape for all that too. So anyway, let me go ahead and cut it, and I'll show you what to do next. All right, so now I got everything chopped down into 24-inch little pieces here. And if you can't tell, I decided to make two tables. One's gonna have a white top and a black bottom, and then the other one's just reverse black top with a white bottom. Should look pretty cool. And the corners, I just chopped them up, rounded them off, and I'll sand them later just to totally smooth them out. But for now, we need to move on to figuring out how to mount the all thread. What's gonna happen is this is actually two pieces. They're gonna be separated into like two different shelves, and the all thread is going to hold them apart. And then we'll put wheels on the bottom, little casters, and you can roll them around. You can put them together as a table, you can separate them, use them as end tables, whatever you want. But the very most important thing is to make sure that the all thread, when it's mounted, is going to be totally straight, and it's not going to be kind of crooked or slightly off, whatever. So the way I'm doing that is by taping the two boards together so that it's like one solid unit, and they're not going to like slightly shift as I'm drilling or whatever. So then we're going to make a we're going to lay out a point for the all thread to be mounted. We'll drill a hole, and then I'll show you what to do after that. Alright, so I made my layout marks. What I did was I come in 3 inches this way, 3 inches that way, made a little X, and then I made a little pilot hole with a little tiny drill bit. Then I'm taking my big 7/16 bit to do the finish hole, and that's because I'm using 7/16 all thread. So check this out. It's a little tricky, but once you get going, it goes in pretty good, especially with the pilot hole. And just like that, totally finished, and both holes are completely even to each other. It should work out great. So I'll finish out the rest, and then I'll show you how to start hooking it together. Right, I pulled everything apart, and I went ahead and I dropped a piece of tape on the top side of all these so I remember which way they go. And the one thing I noticed was that the tape didn't really help the edges of this laminate too well. So as you can see here, see it's still kind of chipped where I used the jigsaw. And then I was wanting to sand this anyway, so what I'm doing is I'm taking my sander with a 120 grit, and I'm actually sanding this entire side, and I'm slightly rounding this off. So check this out. It's a nice smooth finish here, and up here I haven't touched yet. You can see how sharp it is and all these little jagged pieces. So it really helps smooth the piece out and just make it look a lot more finished with the rounded edges and all that. It just brings it up a notch. So anyway, I'm gonna finish all these out, and then I'll show you how to finally assemble everything. Alright, so now the edges are all smoothed over, and this thing feels really nice and smooth and just a lot more polished. So now it's time to mess with the all thread. Now the holes are drilled. The 7/16 all thread just barely fits into the hole. That's what we want. You don't want it too big or it'll wobble around too much if it happens to get loose. But what I'm going to do is cut this down. Now if you want your table to be a little shorter, you can buy all thread in just a 12-inch length, 1 foot. Otherwise you have to go all the way up to a 24-inch piece to go a little longer than that. You can also get 36, 48, probably who knows how long. You can probably get up to 10 feet if you want. But anyway, what I'm going to do is chop mine down to 14 inches, but there's a little trick to it to make sure that your nuts will be able to go back on it after you cut it. So let me show you how to do that. Alright, so what I did was I found the length on my all thread and I marked it with a piece of tape, and I drew an arrow so I knew to cut on this edge. The other thing I did is I went ahead and I ran a nut on here, okay? So now we're going to cut it with a metal cutting blade, and then I'll show you how to take care of it after that. Alright, so I got the piece cut, and as you can see, there's a slight burr to the end. And that's why we put this nut on first, because we can drive it off and help smooth out the burr. If we tried to put the nut on afterwards, it may jam up the threads and you won't be able to get the nut on. So what we can do is run it out, and then it's a little stiff. Okay, there we go. There we go. Yeah, perfect. Now we got it, so it should run on no problem. Yeah, awesome. So that's what you want to do if you want to cut your all thread. Alright, so now it's time to assemble, and the first thing I'm going to do is mount the casters to the bottom. So if you notice, I have a caster here that swivels, and I have one that's stationary. And actually, I'm going to put 2 stationary casters on one end, and then 2 swivels on the other. And then that way this thing will stay in place, but if I need to turn it when we're rolling it around or whatever, it will. But it's not just going to be, you know, loosey-goosey with just a whole bunch of swivels. So what I did, laid a little tape like we did before, measured a 1/2 inch that way, 1/2 inch that way. Then we just line up the caster base to those lines, and you can see those little dots. That's my markings where I'm gonna pre-drill a little hole, and then just hook them on with screws. When they're all done, I'll show you how to put the all thread in. Alright, so now we're going to assemble it, and it's pretty easy. You want to grab your top piece, make sure the top is facing, you know, out, and then grab your piece of all thread and run a nut on it a couple inches down. Alright, then grab a washer that fits your 7/16 all thread and stick it through the hole from the bottom and push it out the top. Put another washer on it, and then we're going to finish it off with these acorn nuts so that it has like a closed top and it's not just a plain old, you know, open nut like all the others we're going to be using. Okay, you want to take your acorn nut and drive it all the way down until it stops. Okay, then push that down, and then the nut that's on the back side, you want to tighten it up all the way. And it can just be hand tight right now. We can tighten it later with like a wrench or whatever. But once all 4 are set, then it's time to put the bottom on. Now assembling the bottom is just as simple, but it's a little trickier. So first thing you want to do is run nuts on the all thread a couple inches down again, drop washers on them. Then you want to take your bottom piece and you want to flip it over, and this time you have to push the all thread through all 4 holes at the same time. So it takes a little work a little finesse getting them all lined up. But once they do, it should pop down. Okay, there we go. They're all in there, so now you just lightly hammer it till they pop down. Okay, you can kind of see here, this one, it chipped the bottom a little bit, but that's okay. It's going to get covered by a washer anyway. So then, kind of like the top, you put washers on all four. It'll cover up any chipping. Probably want to clean the sawdust, but I'm just doing it quick for the video here. All right, and then what you want to do is run your nuts onto the all thread. And then kind of like the top, if you remember with the acorn nuts, we ran them until they bottomed out. Well, with these nuts, we want to run them until the all thread just barely pokes out. All right, and then once you have all the nuts in position so that the all thread is just barely poking out, like maybe by one thread, you want to just kind of grab the whole thing and pull it up so it gets level to those nuts. And then you probably can't see it in the video, but all I'm doing is tightening the nuts underneath until they tighten up to the other side of the shelf piece. Okay, do that to all four. Once it's done, it's pretty much assembled, and then we'll flip it over and I'll show you how to adjust it from there. All right, and then the last thing you want to do is flip it back over, and then you want to tighten all the nuts so this thing doesn't get loose on you or start to wobble or whatever. So all I do is grab the nut underneath, pair of pliers, take a wrench up top, and just snug it up. You don't have to go super tight, just enough where you know it's not going to loose on its own. It should be finished. So now I'll show you what both tables look like together and what you can do with them. It's pretty cool. All right, and here's the finished tables put together. Turned out really cool, very fun, kind of modern Scandinavian look with the black and white, a little bit of metal, a little bit of light wood showing through. And yeah, I realize it's not like solid wood, it's not nice, it's just particle board shells, but it does look cool. When I showed you how you like sand the edges and you round it over and you just, you bring it up a couple of notches and it looks a lot nicer than what it really is. Now the cool thing about these is since they're on casters, you can adjust them however you want. So it doesn't have to be a solid table. You could do a split design, they could be totally separated. You could do like an L, let's say you have like an L-shaped couch or whatever, you could do something like that. And of course, you don't have to even have them this size. These are together pretty good size, separately kind of small. So you could of course make the planks as wide as you want, as long as you want. Different wood, doesn't have to be little scraps like this. You could use anything you wanted, even metal or whatever. And also, you don't even have to use the standard hardware store casters. You could use whatever you want. But anyway, I just kind of want to show you the cool project you can do by finding cheap materials from the scrap bin that don't seem that cool, and you can bump them up a notch like this with a little all thread and some casters. So anyway, hope you like this project. It was fun to make.